the #1 Costa Rica real estate and investment podcast, bringing you experts from all over Costa Rica.
Good morning, guys, and welcome to episode 150 of Costa Rica Real Estate and Investments with me, your host, Richard Tepexon. Today, we're going to be talking with Juan Carlos Hidalgo. He's the president of the Costa Rican Social Christian Political Party, or PUSC as it's known here in Costa Rica. He's a political and economic analyst has been in Washington, D.C., and some of you have probably seen him on CNN and also Voice of America. So today we're going to be talking to him about investing in Costa Rica, the economic outlook for Costa Rica as a country and as a place to invest. Interesting that we've got our first, I would say, real politician on the show. I've known Juan Carlos for quite some time and always he's a Chelsea fan, Chelsea Football Club fan. So he hasn't had the greatest of seasons, but neither has my team, Liverpool Football Club. So anyway, we're going to be chatting with him kind of about the outlook and the future for Costa Rica from an investment and economic standpoint. Remember, guys, if anybody needs any help investing, relocating, or really doing anything in Costa Rica, we can always point you in the right direction or see if we can help you. Don't be afraid, guys. Again, it's just an email. Feel free to email us, info@investingcostarica.com. That's info@investingcostarica.com. We also released a new website this week as well. It's a little bit rough, so we're still working on it. But really, our idea on that website is to kind of provide an analysis of properties in Costa Rica, kind of what the returns would look like on it. So we'll just give a kind of a global amount, an internal rate of return there, cash on cash return, CapEx, because I know that a lot of you like to look at that stuff. So remember, you can contact us, info@investingcostarica.com. But let's get straight into the podcast. Good morning, Juan Carlos. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Not at all. It's an absolute pleasure. I was just mentioning, I think you're the first politician that we've actually had and economist. I don't think we've had an economist either. So both the first politician and economist on the podcast. I know you're very busy, so I appreciate you taking the time to come on here and kind of chat with us.
Well, it's my pleasure.
Fantastic. Well, the first question I always like to ask Juan Carlos, with, I suppose, world economy is kind of in flux, economic outlook a little uncertain. I mean, what are you seeing happening here in Costa Rica? How would you summarize it?
Well, the problem with the Costa Rican economy is that we have a dual economy, just like Ireland did back in the 1980s. We have a very dynamic sector that is exposed to the world, which are free trade zones. Free trade zones are growing at a rate of 20% a year, which is astounding. However, free trade zones only represent 15% of the GDP. The remaining 85% of GDP is barely growing. And there you have a big problem of unemployment and informality. The unemployment rate in Costa Rica has been above 10% for over 13 years. And the informality rate is approaching the 15% rate. So unless we tackle the lack of competitiveness in that 85% of the economy that is not a free trade zone, we're going to have increasing inequality in Costa Rica. We're going to have a concentration of wealth around the metropolitan areas surrounding San Jose. And this, is not sustainable. It's not sustainable economically. It's not sustainable politically. So that's, I think, the biggest challenge that we have to tackle in the upcoming years.
A lot of people talk to me kind of about kind of Costa Rica and kind of where it's going, because it's kind of really seen as like a beacon out there for, sustainability. Everybody's very happy here as well. You go to the beach areas and you go to the city areas, and you go to the rural areas, they're all very, very different here as well. But I think one of the interesting things that happens here in Costa Rica is that people don't understand is if you don't have a job, the government's not giving you money, right?
Yeah. We have a generous welfare state. I mean, we get quote unquote free healthcare, free education, which we know is not free. It's actually very expensive when it comes to the amount of money that the government spends on those items. But we have free housing, et cetera, but we don't have generous unemployment benefits. If you're unemployed, you are basically on your own. And of course, in a country such as Costa Rica, being in Latin America, you have the support of family networks and social networks,
Yep.
And that means that, for example, during the pandemic, when unemployment reached 24%, the increase in poverty rates wasn't as dramatic as the increase in unemployment. But yeah, that's one of the things that you need to work on. You need to tackle labor laws. Labor laws here in Costa Rica date back to 80 years ago. They are not fit for a competitive economy, for a globalized economy. And in particular, one of the problems that we have in that regard are high Social Security taxes or labor taxes. If you hire a worker, you have to pay 26.5% in labor taxes, and that discourages.
Plus,
yeah, exactly.
The 13th
which discourages.
month.
Yeah. Plus the aguinaldo, the 13th month, which discourages hiring particularly low-skilled workers. If you look at, let's look at a comparison. Labor taxes in Costa Rica are among the highest in the OECD. Let's remember that the OECD is a club of high-income countries, mostly developed countries. So we have labor taxes that are disproportionately high compared to high-income countries, but our labor force, 60% of it is unskilled. So this is a toxic combination, and we shouldn't be surprised then that the result is high unemployment and high informality.
Yeah, but I would also, I suppose I question here is that welfare state is very expensive, right? So, the only way to fund that is through some form of taxes, which in this case would be Social Security kind of orientated taxes. It's how do you get, you have to have that balance, I suppose, right?
Yes, of course. And the thing is that not all taxes are born equal, as I would say.
Sure.
Some taxes discourage investment and employment. Yeah. I think that it's easier, or more, it's not easier, it's more reasonable to fund welfare programs through tax on consumption, let's say, like the VAT, than through a tax on employment. Because if you discourage employment, then everything goes wrong after that.
Correct. Yeah.
Whereas if you're taxing consumption, well, at least the wealth has already been created. People already have jobs, and you're just taxing what they spend.
Well, and also you get to tax a black market out there, which we know exists as well. So because any time that they consume, of course, there is a tax there. But we'll not get into that. But it's interesting about the free trade zones here, because Costa Rica continues to open them up, as you mentioned there. And could you just explain to people listening to this what a free trade zone is? Just because, again, does it mean that I'm paying no taxes? What does it mean?
Yeah, it is a special regime that was created after the economic crisis that we had in the country in the early 1980s. Companies come here, and under the latest changes of the rules, companies come here and they're exempt for 8 years to pay income tax. And after that, they start paying income tax gradually until they finally graduate and pay the overall income tax rate of 30%, which is what the rest of the country, the rest of the economy pays. This is a very gradual process, and there are a lot of rules that if you reinvest money, you don't pay again, and so on. So okay. it could be made permanent depending on how companies play with the rules. It's not supposed to be permanent though. Besides that, the rules is that most companies in free trade zones have to export most of their production outside the country, so it's meant for promoting exports. And they don't pay other taxes, they don't pay other custom duties. They have all the facilities you can imagine when it comes to opening a shop. They have simple rules, they have what we call ventanillas únicas, which is, like you only do all your regulations and file your forms at a single shop. You don't have to go institution through institution. So one of the most frustrating things about free trade zones, and believe me, I'm a big believer and a big supporter of free trade zones, is that you have the political class in Costa Rica defending free trade zones, which is great, and they realize that free trade zones are good. But why don't we extend some of the same or all of the same facilities to the rest of the economy? We have free trade zones growing at 20%. Free trade zones are the only parts of the economy that actually are creating jobs. Look at this statistic from CINDE. CINDE is an investment promotion agency here in Costa Rica. From 2018 to 2022, 9 out of 10 jobs created in Costa Rica were created in free trade zones. So free trade zone, formal jobs. So free trade zones are basically the only parts of the economy that are creating formal jobs, well-paying jobs. The rest of the economy is tank. So we have this dual economy, as I mentioned, and the frustrating thing is that politicians realize that free trade zones work. They're fantastic at creating good-paying jobs, but resist extending the benefits to the rest of the economy. What will happen to the rest of Costa Rica's economy if we have low taxes, deregulation, and all these other facilities to do business?
I mean, it could become an investment paradise. Well, even more than it is.
It could become an island. It could become an island.
Yeah.
And right now we're looking at a very interesting moment in world history. The globalization we knew from the late 1970s to up to 2015 or so is over. The competition, the strategic competition between China and the United States, which could lead us to a war sometime in this decade or next decade, is changing the way that companies think about their investments. Investments no longer follow a logic of efficiency. Now investments follow a logic of security. Some people talking in the United States and Europe about decoupling. Now the term is de-risking, but the fact is that a lot of companies feel that they have too much exposure to China and Asia, and they're moving parts of their operations to closer to home. That's where nearshoring comes into being, bringing investment to the near abroad or to friendly countries that don't represent a threat to supply chain. And guess what? There's nothing friendly in La Pura Vida. We're a friendly country in the middle of the Americas, and we're near. So we check both marks when it comes to nearshoring and friendshoring, and we should take more advantage of this opportunity, which is gonna dictate the rules of the investment flows in the next 20 to 30 years.
Why else? I mean, I think that they are all great points. Costa Rica has a lot of stuff going for it, but why do you think Costa Rica is an excellent place to invest? And I say that from a large global company down to an individual person looking to, I don't know, buy a condo or buy a piece of land and build a home here or build a hotel. I mean, what would be your selling points, and what would be, I think you've covered some of the stuff, which is like, look, you need to be aware of. So security costs here. You mentioned security, and let's touch on that again in a minute, just because I know a listener a while back was like, Rich, can you talk about security a little bit? Because I'm starting to hear kind of noises here, noise from the beach areas. But like, what are the things that you think make Costa Rica just really great for investment?
Well, we have a formidable trademark. We have a formidable name recognition. We are the oldest democracy in Latin America. We're a mostly peaceful country in the sense that we haven't suffered from wars or revolutions for decades. We are among the top 20 most robust democracies in the world, according to the Economist Intelligence Group. We are a nature-loving country, as you mentioned. So there are so many things about the narrative about Costa Rica that is great. And we're in the middle of the Americas. We are only 3 hours away from the United States in a flight. People enjoy coming to our beaches. People enjoy coming to do tourism, and increasingly they're buying real estate. And we see some regions in the country, mostly in the area of Guanacaste and Santa Teresa, that are booming right now with investment. Yeah. Now the challenge is how to make this investment orderly, so sustainably, so it doesn't ruin the environment. But we have so many other parts of the country that are still untouched. You know, you have the region in Osa, in the southern part of the country, that is starting to see some development, and the region of Golfito, etc. So I'm very enthusiastic about the prospects of Costa Rica. But again, you mentioned one of the challenges, which is sustainability, how to make this thing, this progress sustainable so it doesn't ruin the environment. And the other one is security, as you said. Unfortunately, Costa Rica is suffering from the violence that comes from the war on drugs in Latin America. It used to be that drug shipments from Colombia to the United States were sent by sea, so they didn't go into Costa Rican territory. They just go through Costa Rican waters. But then, thanks to the joint patrolling agreement with the U.S. Coast Guard, a lot of shipments started going through land. And the moment they started going through land, local gangs became empowered. They handle the cocaine. Now they started creating a local market for it. And right now we're seeing levels of violence that we haven't seen in our history. Still, they pale in comparison to other countries in the region, but it's not. The trend is alarming. And that's something we need to tackle. We don't have an army. Fortunately, we don't have an army. We have seen in other countries in the region that when the army gets involved in the war on drugs, things gets worse. But our security forces are not a match for drug cartels. So we need to be intelligent in the way that we tackle with this threat, because we have seen in other countries what it can do.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, from what I've seen, we see a lot of that in more of the, the city areas. I mean, it does touch the beach every so often, but not really that much. I mean, security at the beach is kind of, I would say there has been an increase in crime at the beach just because there has been so much money pouring in there as well. But local communities have got together. I know Playa Grande, Tamarindo, Nasara now have patrols. Like, they've hired private security companies to drive around because there were some break-ins, those kind of things. But the thing I always tell people about the coastal areas, because that's where a lot of the investment is a lot of it's opportunistic crime. Like, it's, you leave a bike out, you leave your bag on the beach, that kind of stuff. And I mean, in any country that's going to happen. Here, you just need to be smart, basically, and it's funny sometimes. I say that people get off the aircraft here, they have a cocktail and forget everything else that they would do at home, just go straight out the window. And it's pura vida. I've had a cocktail, all is good, that nothing's ever going to happen.
Yeah, indeed. But we need to invest more on security for sure.
I agree.
The number of cops that we have per 100,000 inhabitants is lower than we used to have back in the 2000s. It's just that sometimes, we don't think that security is a priority. I mean, we think that employment is a priority, high cost of living is a priority, and so on. So we don't pay attention to these issues. But when they come to bite you, And right now, security is the most pressing concern to Costa Ricans, according to the latest polls.
Yeah, no, and I agree. And again, it could come back and bite you in the ass from the point of view of if global corporations are looking to again, if free trade zones are growing at 20% per year, they're looking for a safe, secure place to basically do business. If that doesn't happen to be Costa Rica and there's another country that does, it will get that business.
Yeah, we have the advantage right now that the region is not doing particularly well,
Correct.
So let's say that you're a CEO and you want to move some of your operations to Latin America. What do you see in Mexico? You see López Obrador, who is scaring away investors. You see Petro in Colombia, a socialist. You see, let's not even go to Venezuela. You see Lula in Brazil, a left-wing populist. You see chaos in Peru. You see another socialist in Chile raising taxes and so on. So there are a few spots in Latin America. If you want to invest in Latin America, there are a few spots where you can do it. Uruguay has a center-right president that is doing things pretty well. He's on his way out, but look where Uruguay is. They're over right down there in the continent. They're 7 hours, 8 hours away from the United States. They only have access to one ocean, whereas Costa Rica has a magnificent location. We have access to both oceans. and we have a fairly well-educated workforce. And that's why, even though we have all these competitiveness issues that we need to tackle, investment is pouring into Costa Rica. If you look at the numbers, both in 2022 and 2021 and 2022, foreign investment was over 5% of GDP in Costa Rica, which is double what a country like Uruguay, for example, is getting, despite that they've been doing all these reforms in recent years. So investment is pouring in Costa Rica without us doing much about it, without us doing anything different from what we've done in the last 20 years. What will happen again if we were to engage in a very aggressive, very solid program of economic reform, structural reforms when it comes to labor markets, to taxation, to regulation, to the education, and so on? That's something that needs to be done if we want to stop doing the nadadito de perro, what we call in Costa Rica here. Have you ever seen a dog swimming? They go like this. Well, we need to stop that. That's exactly the story of Costa Rica. Growing at a 3% rate per year is not enough if you want to reach a higher level of development and progress.
But I mean, I'm going to say something about that. I mean, Costa Rica's growth has been very organic and steady, which has been good. Like, everybody wants that rocket growth, but with that rocket growth, sometimes can come the slide down as well. Whereas Costa Rica's just been very steady Eddie. It's kind of, it's the turtle and the hare. Costa Rica has been the turtle, but it's a beautiful turtle, that has grown kind of organically. And like, it's just, I say this, and this is probably not right, of like, all these things were done and Costa Rica woke up one day and went, we've got penicillin. Like, we like, all these things just came together. All these decisions, individual decisions made by very smart people were made, and it kind of came together and made this magical place that we have as Costa Rica today. I just wonder though, is if we accelerate that, what will that do to Costa Rica? Like, will that Pura Vida be lost a little bit, do you think?
I don't think so. We have many good things going on in Costa Rica, for sure. But let me tell you, in the last campaign where I walked and I went through rural places and places even here near San Jose, a lot of people are struggling too. They cannot, they cannot feed their kids properly. They cannot send them to good schools. They don't have jobs. They lose sleep over how to pay for the bills. And that shouldn't be like that, that shouldn't be like that, because again, we have been so fortunate for decisions that we've made in the past, as you said, but also for circumstantial situations. We didn't choose the place where we are, the location. We're fortunate enough when it comes to natural disasters. I mean, the other day I was looking at earthquakes here in Costa Rica. The strongest earthquake we had is of 7.6 back in the 1990s, and less than 50 people died back then from that earthquake. So we've been very fortunate for so many circumstantial events and from decisions we've made that is not justifiable that so many people in the country are not doing well. We should be better. And that's why I don't think that by embracing progress, we're going to lose the Pura Vida, that we're going to be Pura Vida and also rich.
Yeah, I think it just goes back to it. We just need to make sure that the decisions that are made in this country go back to the values that are always there, of sustainability, family, it's just, I just spoke to a guy this morning, which was like, you can just sense here, man. People are like generally happy. Like, he comes from New York. He's like, it's slower. People are generally happy. He's like, this is a place I could live in.
Yeah. And as someone who lived for 14 years outside the country, let me tell you that I'm pretty happy to be back, and I don't want to go anywhere.
Wow. I just got my citizenship, dude, so I'm here for life.
Congratulations. I'm going to be asking for your vote in the next election.
You've always got my vote, Juan Carlos. You know that, buddy. So, what advice would you give to anyone? Like the individual rather than the large business. What advice would you give them when looking to invest in Costa Rica? Well,
get a good lawyer. That's something that, of course, you'll need when it comes to an extremely bureaucratic country. You have to have a good lawyer. You have to have patience. It's worth it, you said, but you need to know that things won't happen as expediently as in developed countries. That's one of the reasons we're not developed yet. We need to deal with red tape here and with bureaucratic, arbitrary decisions sometimes. But a good lawyer will help you navigate the bureaucracy, and I think that's the number one recommendation that I will give someone.
Definitely. I mean, I was just thinking about this. I mean, what happens, and maybe this is already happening. I mean, there must be areas of Costa Rica that have high unemployment or need development. I mean, what would happen if these free trade zones were really targeted to those areas? And it's not just businesses, but like, what happens if it was, I'm going to use the word hospitality because it's something that generates jobs and really educates people of like, what happens if free trade zones in Costa Rica were developed for hospitality?
Well, I'm actually a big supporter and a big promoter of the idea that the whole country should be a big free trade zone. Let's not just extend free trade zones to undeveloped parts of the country. Let's just make the whole economy a free trade zone, just like Ireland did in the 1980s. Let's remember what happened to Ireland. Ireland was in the middle of a serious economic crisis. Its biggest export was its people that were like leaving the country, going to Britain, going to the United States. Unemployment was high. The government was broke. We're talking about the mid-1980s. And then they decided to engage in a very aggressive set of reforms, starting with cutting spending, cutting taxes. Let's remember that the corporation tax in Ireland back in 1987 was 50%, the highest rate. Wow. And they decided to decrease it steadily, slowly but steadily, to 12.5%. And Ireland became a magnet of investment, and now it's a very wealthy country. It went from being the third poorest country in Western Europe to the second richest in a matter of a generation. So I think that should be done. I mean, that's why I keep insisting on structural reforms when it comes to taxes, when it comes to labor laws. We need investment in infrastructure too, because it doesn't matter whether you open a free trade zone in Osa or Golfito or Cotobruz in the southern part of the country. If you don't have roads, if you don't have an airport, it's going to be very difficult to attract massive investment. So we need certain issues, certain policies to become more competitive. And I think that making the entire country a free trade zone, which is not simply lowering taxes, let's be clear about that. It's just a set of comprehensive reforms and coherent reforms. If we do that, I'm very sure that we can replicate the example of Ireland in the 2020s and 2030s.
Well, I mean, you mentioned that, the value-added tax, that we have. I mean, if you have consumption tax, as more money enters the country and there's more jobs and more people spend, I mean, that tax will be, generated anyway. It's not that like lowering taxes is going to reduce. I think it's quite the opposite. I think typically in the past where you've seen taxes reduce, tax revenues have increased.
Yeah, well, that happened in Ireland with the corporation tax. The corporation tax was 50%. It went to 12.5%. And now Ireland gets double revenues from a 12.5% tax rate than what they did when it was 50%. We have a saying in Costa Rica. Let me get this right. You don't put the cart before the oxes. Like in this regard, we tax the generation of wealth instead of taxing consumption, which is not reasonable. If you look at, for example, Scandinavian countries, everybody when they think about Sweden and all the countries, they think about high taxes. But if you look at the corporate tax rate in the Scandinavian countries, it's 19%, 20%. They're fairly low, even lower than the OECD average. Whereas in Costa Rica, it's 30%. So we tax the wealth creation, which means that wealth doesn't get created. We tax employment, which means that unemployment is not created, instead of taxing consumption, which is when more people already have the money and they're going to spend it. Well, let's tax it then.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I suppose we get some of that on import tax for sure, just because everything, costs more money here. But I mean, What are your favorite places in Costa Rica, Juan Carlos? I'd love to ask people this. I mean, again, you left the country for a while, you come back. I mean, what are those places that you just love to visit?
Well, I'm not particularly fond on beaches because I don't like the heat. I don't like the sand. That's not me. But I know that that's the biggest commodity Costa Rica has is the beauty of its beaches. But I like mountains. I like going to the region of Cartago, for example, which is very cool in its climate. You see beautiful mountains and volcanoes like Volcán Turrialba and Volcán Irazu. You see rivers. If you go to the northern part of the country, you have Volcán Arenal, where it's an area where I'm from, San Carlos. Those areas, and recently I went into the zona Los Santos, which is the mountains near San Jose, where one of the best coffee in the world is grown. That's beautiful. That's beautiful, and that's a part of the country that should be thriving because of rural tourism. So there are so many parts of the country that it depends on what you want. We have 36, I think, microclimates in Costa Rica. So if you want to hike, you have beautiful places to hike. You have Chirripó Mountain, which is almost 4,000 meters, a very high mountain.
I came down it Thursday.
Oh, congratulations.
So
you have that. If you want to just dwell at the beach, you can do that. If you want to explore caves, if you want to do rafting, I mean, there are so many things that you can do here that is amazing.
Yeah. I mean, it truly is. I mean, it's magical. Until you've been here, you'll never understand it. But I mean, you can drive 30 minutes here and everything changes. Like the scenery, the climate, it's even the drive to, say, San Carlos, you go through a huge amount of microclimates, like that AC, like you're driving windows because it's too hot. Then it's like windows up because it's too cold. Yeah. I mean, you go through everything. So, Well, Juan Carlos, my last question for you is, I think I've kept you long enough, which I love to ask everyone. If you inherited $500,000 and had to invest it into a business or real estate in Costa Rica, what would you invest it in and why?
Oh, that you got me there. I will get the money and I will wait for, and I'm not sure if I'm going to get in trouble with this, but I will wait for the legalization of recreational cannabis, which is hopefully is going to happen in a couple of years. I think is a very interesting business. I've seen it in the United States. I got this question in the United States at some point, and I always recommend it to people because I think that I'm a big believer that the war on drugs is a failure and that we should move on to regulating some of these softer drugs. In the case of cannabis, you see already in Costa Rica, even though it's still illegal, a lot of businesses going on, selling cookies and other stuff. I think that once it's regulated, which is the government is actually pushing for regulation of cannabis, recreational cannabis. I think it's going to happen in the next couple of years. I think that's going to be a very interesting business.
It's the first time we've ever had that response, and it's a very interesting one, Juan Carlos.
And from a conservative politician, so
well,
I think that's unique.
Definitely. Well, Juan Carlos, I really appreciate you taking the time out of what I know is a very busy day here to join us here on the podcast. And I'd love to get you on at some point in the future and get kind of an update of where everything is.
Well, my pleasure, Richard, and let's keep talking.
Sounds good. Thanks, buddy. Interesting podcast there from Juan Carlos Hidalgo, guys, the president of PUSC, which is, again, a very large political company, political party here in Costa Rica. So very interesting getting his viewpoint from a political and kind of investment point of view, because I know quite a few of you are looking to invest in here. And really you get an idea of kind of what's happening at a, I suppose a national level and a political level here kind of going forwards. But it certainly seems that there is a huge focus on these free trade zones. That's not going away. And I think that that's only going to increase. Costa Rica is a great platform for that. It's very sustainable, very secure. We touched on security a little bit there, which is a huge focus of the government here. And I think it's only going to kind of intensify as we go forwards here. But, a lot of these large multinational companies from all around the world are really investing here in Costa Rica. We do have a well-educated workforce here that does speak English. And you can just see it whenever you come here. People are just blown away that we have Intel, we have HP, we have IBM, we have Amazon here, like all of the large ones. Plus also a lot of the medical devices and biomedical, advancements are being made here in Costa Rica. I think actually some of the new chips being done by Intel have been developed here as well. So there are very smart people here. And I think that's only going to continue. And I think as Juan Carlos said there, a focus on making this a Garden of Eden for investment from the individuals, but also from a corporate level, as long as I think it's done sustainably, I think could really turn, this into I suppose, a paradise for investment, but also just, continuing to be a paradise as well there. And it was interesting, I suppose, comparisons there to Ireland. And I think, Costa Rica and Ireland do have quite a few things, in common. We probably get as much rain as them just in a very shorter period of time. But we definitely get more sun. It's very green and just very friendly people as well. So it's going to be interesting to see kind of what happens over the next coming years. Juan Carlos's viewpoint there on, legalization of cannabis and investing in that business, could be very interesting in seeing what happens there. As Costa Rica continues to look for revenue from tax revenues to support this very socialist system that we have here. It's just going to be interesting to see how these kind of things roll together here. And we have politicians, I think a lot of the time people don't understand that Costa Rica's political parties were, in the last elections, I think there were 25 presidential candidates from multiple different parties. Our assembly here, our, I suppose, Congress here is not made up of two sides. We don't just have Republicans and Democrats here. There is a huge variety and not one party has control. So I'd like to say that only the good stuff gets through, but that's not always the case. Sometimes it's the people that do the best horse trading, as we like to say in England, get the best kind of, I suppose, ideas and also, laws through. So we'll kind of see where that goes. But I really hope that you guys enjoyed that podcast there. It's 150th podcast, so I wanted to kind of get something on there to kind of just to get a different viewpoint on Costa Rica, and I hope you got that. But remember, guys, if you'd like to reach out to us, you can do info@investingcostarica.com about anything about investing, relocation, building, construction here. I think we're up to 27 projects now that we're project managing here in Costa Rica. I keep saying that we're not going to get any bigger, but I'm a sucker for helping people. And I think anyone that's spoken to us here in the office and that have worked with us knows that we're very passionate about what we do. And just making sure that you make the right decisions for you and have a soft landing. I'll give information away from free contacts. I've been coming to Costa Rica for over 21 years, been living now for close to 19, I think it is now. So I'm now a citizen, just waiting on my card, but they approved my citizenship here. So as you can see there, Juan Carlos is expecting my vote in the next election. So, I'm here for the long term of Costa Rica, just making sure that people make the right decision here, whatever that decision may be, in Costa Rica. So feel free to reach out to us, info@investingcostarica.com. But till the next podcast, guys, really appreciate you listening to it, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks. Bye.
The #1 Costa Rica real estate and investment podcast, bringing you experts from all over Costa Rica.